My affair has finally been discovered by my husband. We had a three-way meeting, me, my husband, and the man I was having an affair with. It was absolutely shocking. The guy I chatted with told me, "I've lost my feelings for you." I guess I was the only one who thought this was just a dream. I am a 32-year-old professional who works from home. My husband is 27 years old, and the other man is 33 years old. After a year of dating, I got married to my husband, and this all happened as we were entering our 4th year of marriage. My husband seems to be punishing the man firmly. I had never seen him angry before, but in that moment, I was truly scared. My husband returned home, said nothing, and went out alone again. He hasn't come back for over 2 hours now. I was alone, became sad, and started crying. I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion. When I woke up, I was covered with blankets, and breakfast was ready. It seems like things have completely ended with the man I was having an affair with. When the affair was discovered, he begged my husband not to tell his family and even prostrated himself. It turns out that a child had been born between him and his wife without me knowing, which completely turned me off. Even in the morning, my husband didn't say anything to me. It seems that my husband had suspected our affair for quite some time. The man I was involved with was one of the friends I regularly drank with. Even after getting married, my husband would occasionally take me out for drinks, saying it's not good to feel suffocated just because I am at home. However, I began to feel increasingly stressed about my husband and eventually started going out for drinks alone, which he permitted. That's where I made friends and met the man. Eventually, I began meeting one-on-one, and our relationship continued to drag on. When the affair was discovered, we were coming out of our usual hotel. As usual, when we came out, my husband was standing at the entrance. The affair had been going on for about 2 years. When it was discovered, I was shocked by everything. My husband, who was waiting at the entrance, said something like, "If you're going to sleep with another man's wife, you need to be prepared. If you're going to take her from me, step up and make her happy in my stead." In response to this, the man simply apologized and talked about how it was just a game. He recently had a child and ended up crying. My husband was quietly furious at the man's reaction. "Don't think you can treat another man's wife like a toy and get away with it. You need to start from scratch. Be prepared for everything," he said matter-of-factly. The man was pale. All I could do was stand there in silence. Since then, all I can think about is what happened with my husband. Only after all this happened did I deeply regret it. But after my husband left for work, I received an email from the man saying he still wanted to continue the relationship. I wondered what he was thinking. By the way, I haven't received anything from my husband. Even when I sent him an email, there was no reply. I was terrified of the night my husband would come home, but I was ready to end it all because I thought I saw the man's true colors, even though I really loved him. That's why I did everything he said. I had been rejecting marital life with my husband ever since he told me he didn't want it, and I believed the man's words that he wanted to be with me forever. If he had proposed, I would have divorced my husband without hesitation. I really thought he might be the one for me. He seemed like a great guy before the affair was discovered, but in reality, he had a wife and child of his own, and he was a very feminine man. What have I been doing all this time? I only started thinking this after everything happened, and I knew that my husband would likely not forgive me. When I was infatuated with him, I didn't give my husband a second thought. I was really just thinking about myself. It feels like I became very calm now. I understood painfully well who and what I should cherish, but it was too late. But I was ready for this. I think I decided to quit because I became calm. I now find myself, who was obsessed with him, to be frightening. I wonder how my husband felt. When I think about that, I feel incredibly pathetic. I was only thinking about what would be convenient for me. Like, if it's not discovered, there's no problem, or if it's discovered, we'll figure it out. Thinking about such things, night came, and around 8 p.m., I received an email from my husband saying he was coming home. Although it was only about a 20-minute distance from our house to his office, he didn't return even by 10 p.m. I was worried alone. In the end, my husband came home around midnight, and he simply said, "I called out your guy, we had drinks, and then he just went to the bedroom. I was so confused that I didn't understand the situation. I was relieved from the bottom of my heart when he came home, but I hadn't expected that he had been drinking with him at the time. I had no idea what my husband was thinking. I wished I could ask him directly, but it was not a situation where I could say anything from my end. It was simply impossible. We had hardly spoken since our discussion. While there was a child on the way in his wife's belly, we did not have children. My husband seemed to want a child, but he stopped talking about it when I rejected the idea. Eventually, at my husband's suggestion, we started sleeping in separate bedrooms. After he came home, my husband stayed holed up in his bedroom. Normally, I thought a person who was cheated on would yell, get angry, or lash out, but I hadn't been told anything yet. On the contrary, there was breakfast in the morning. He covered me with a blanket when I was sleeping. I felt like I should do as my husband says. If he gets angry, I should at least say something. At least he said something, but my feelings only grew stronger. I was aware that I was truly despicable, but it was hurtful. In the end, I couldn't sleep and decided to talk, so I went to the bedroom. When I gently opened the bedroom door, I could see that my husband was still awake. But he was just staring out the window, and when I saw that, I lost my voice. After a while, my husband came out of the bedroom, and when I returned to the living room, I was deep in thought, alone. He only said to me, "I'm going out tomorrow, so go to bed early." There was no way I could sleep. The next day we went for a drive for the first time in a long while. Although we didn't really look at the scenery, we just talked about what had happened so far and about the future. Here it was clearly decided that we would get a divorce. I was spoiled by my husband's kindness, but it was foolish. Infidelity only lowered my self-worth. I regretted that I didn't realize it before I lost happiness. The divorce was proposed by my husband. He said, "I have to leave you because I love you. I can't make you happy, so find someone who can treat you properly. I'm really sorry. I wanted a child with you." I couldn't stop crying with regret. When I realized it was the end, I could feel my husband's pain and could only apologize. If we had a child, our lives might have been different. I think we could have looked at each other firmly. When my husband told me about the divorce, I realized again that there were so many things I didn't want to lose. Even after he proposed the divorce, my husband was nothing but kind, so we both ended up crying. My interactions with him were limited to his saying, "I'll do what I want." He didn't give me any guidance. Strangely enough, I found myself falling for my husband again when I learned of the words he had heard from my affair partner. But I didn't deserve to think about my own happiness. Now, I want to take care of my husband's happiness. That's truly how I felt, and I didn't want to be in a romantic relationship anymore. My husband told me, "If you're not solely committed to me, then our marriage has no meaning." I believe marriage is about holding on to each other tightly so we don't drift apart. And within that bond, working hard together, loving each other, and continuously finding happiness. He had given up on the idea of reconciliation, even though we used to be drinking buddies, and would often end up at the same hotel after a night out. It was always the same place, a hotel that my husband knew about. I had lied about going to a party and instead went straight to the hotel. Looking back, it was probably obvious. I think my husband started to suspect something when I began rejecting our child. I would always make excuses, citing my poor health or mood. Eventually, my husband would say, "Invite me when you're in the mood," or something like that. It seems that he confirmed my infidelity about 6 months later when, harboring a suspicion, he followed me and saw me entering a hotel. He told me, looking pained, that everything went white for him in that moment. At the time, I was so consumed by my lover that I didn't even think about my husband. I was simply hoping for the best. During car rides, my husband talked more than he used to. I was caught cheating, and there were times when I found him to be kind. I wondered if this was his way of getting revenge or if he was just feeling relieved because the burden had been lifted. Those were the only things on my mind. Before we got married, we had discussed infidelity, and he had made it clear that he would immediately divorce me if I ever cheated. I never thought it was possible for me to be unfaithful. But now it has led to our divorce. Looking back, I realized that my affair stemmed from our differences in values. I met him during that time, and while confiding in him, I learned that he was going through the same struggles as I was. I crossed the line out of loneliness and pain about 6 months after I started dating him. I asked why he always used contraception, and he told me, "I want to be truly serious with you once we're together." Feeling jealous, I became more and more infatuated with him. After that, I started refusing to have a child with my husband. I suppose it was out of pride, but my husband suggested that we sleep separately. At that time, I was only interested in my lover, and I didn't care about my husband, regardless of what he proposed. Looking back, I realized I was being blatantly obvious, and I was completely oblivious to my surroundings. I wish he hadn't said those words. Even though I was acting so cold, my husband probably thought I wasn't having an affair. He was the kind person who would never do to others what he didn't want done to himself. After the drive, we returned home in silence. That evening, a mutual friend of ours was due to come over because they had something to discuss. I had a hunch it was about the recent events. The plan was to discuss it with both sets of parents the following day. Eventually, our friend arrived and we discussed the situation. It was during this discussion that I learned of an incident from my husband's past that I hadn't known about. Hearing about it made me realize that I had truly messed up, and I was running away. The person who came to ask was the wife of a friend from my husband's college days. These friends of my husband got married after we did, and the reason they met in the first place was our wedding ceremony. Ever since they got married, we often did things together. My husband seemed to have secretly confided about my affair to this couple. The first time he went to their house, he broke down crying and said, "I've been taken away again." It was during this discussion that I first learned that my husband's girlfriend had been taken away by her ex-boyfriend while he was in college. Hearing this fact reminded me of a time I had asked my husband about his past. "We should be focusing on the future. You and I are here now because of our past." I remembered him saying something like that. Apparently, after hearing about the situation, our friend asked my husband what he planned to do. My husband said, "I want to believe that she will come back. I want to hold out for a year, become stronger, and try again with new feelings, if she returns." Through this, I learned that our friend had simply listened to my husband's complaints, and that my husband had been putting on a brave face at home. But in the end, my husband chose divorce. He probably thought I wouldn't come back to him. I destroyed my husband's positive feelings and even lost a friend. That day turned out to be the most exhausting day of my life. The next day, I broke the news to my parents that I was getting a divorce. Naturally, I told them the truth. But what shocked me was seeing my husband on his knees begging my parents for forgiveness. He said I couldn't make her happy. Both my mom and dad were in tears. I felt like I had betrayed even my parents and was paralyzed with guilt. My father in his anger slapped me hard. My husband tried to stop him and ended up getting hit too. Later, when things settled down, my dad asked me why I had an affair. I was so ashamed. I couldn't find any words. Then my husband spoke up. He said I was so busy with work that I didn't give her the time and attention she needed. I believe she was stressed because of me. The blame is on me. Even after that, my husband continued to defend me. I was beside him, tears streaming down my face. He asked, "Why do we have to divorce?" He asked, "Why can't I be with you?" I genuinely didn't want to be apart. I wished I could turn back time before the affair. If we had communicated better, maybe we could have remained happy together. All I felt was regret. I realized just how foolish I had been. That night, I brought up the topic of the other man to my husband again. It seems he has no idea who I am talking about. He has no intentions of telling his wife about our affair. It's not her or their unborn child's fault, he explained. He told the other man, "The statute of limitations for an affair is 20 years from the start and 3 years from discovery. Until then, you better take care of them both. If anything happens, I will find you, and you won't like what follows." Lastly, he muttered with a weird expression, "If something has to break, let it just be us." I felt like I lost sight of what mattered most. I wished we had searched for solutions together. Eventually, I severed ties with the other man for good. In hindsight, he had nothing going for him. I haven't received any messages from him. But when I told my husband I got a message from him after he found out, my husband said he already knew. Apparently, he had been checking my phone. It seems he has already talked to him about that as well. He said I'll mentally corner you that I repeatedly apologized to my husband and even offered to give him money. But he had no plans to demand compensation either from me or the other man. If money could fix things, give me back my happiness. He yelled at me. He was in tears. All I could do was apologize. He then told me how he truly felt about me. All I could do was regret my actions. I felt lost, even though it might be better if I wasn't around anymore. But now the idea of betraying my husband is unimaginable. I don't even want to think about it. Before everything came out, it all felt like a dream. But now I think I've been awakened. Even if he approached me after my divorce, I would reject him without a doubt. Realizing how blind I was only when things turned this bad makes me feel so stupid. Deep down I don't want a divorce, but I know that it's just my selfishness talking. And I have to divorce for my husband's sake. It's the least I can do now. The divorce papers will be filed within a month. Until then, I'll go back to my parents' house and find an apartment to start anew. My job allows me to work from home, which might be a good thing. When my husband met with him again for drinks, he apparently wanted to keep things hush-hush and had prepared alimony. But my husband refused, simply throwing the money on the floor. I can earn money on my own. The reason we get married isn't it because there are things we can't do by ourselves. We find someone we love. I couldn't give any money to my husband like that. I wish I could have told him I'd make up for it my whole life if he'd just stay with me. But knowing how he feels now, I can't. Because he wants a divorce, so I decided to agree to it. I shouldn't cry and I don't have the right to. After talking with his parents, my husband told me this. It's also my fault that you had an affair. While waiting, I thought a lot about what to do next. I did want you to come back, but I also considered where you'd be happiest. Just thinking about you with another man made me want to disappear. I pondered over and over either to rebuild or divorce, but I felt that divorcing is best for both of us. I still love you, but you're not only mine anymore. I thought marriage was about both of us creating a home and continuously elevating each other, both emotionally and physically. You give that up. Our married life became just a meaningless cohabitation. So we must part. I think we'll find our happiness separately. Let's stop causing more pain. All I could do was nod. I felt the tears rolling down my cheeks. After our talk, he seemed happier and kinder than before. We talked more, even laughed. But looking at him was extremely painful for me. I thought that no matter how much I apologized, it would only hurt him more. I had heard that when another guy took his girlfriend back in his student days, he would angrily reject her. He had angrily followed the guy and made prank calls, but he was surprisingly calm this time, nothing like before. He said, maybe since it happened before, I can be surprisingly cool about it now. To be honest, I wasn't satisfied with my life with him. But I didn't know about his past then, and when we tried talking, I always ended up being too assertive, probably hurting him even more. Maybe that's why I got so attached to the other man. It might have been more physical than emotional. And he had told me multiple times that he would divorce and we could be together. I had heard he was discussing a divorce with his wife, but I had nothing to do with it. However, the reality was different. When I found out, I realized he had a child on the way, and I was just a fling. It was a shock, but having my husband there helped me snap back to reality. I realized albeit late who really cared for me. After betraying and hurting him so much, I selfishly realized that I needed him now. With those feelings, when I was apartment hunting, he invited me for drinks. There's someone I want you to meet. You know them, he said. But I was anxious. I couldn't help but think, is this some form of revenge? Even if it was, I felt I had to accept it. I was prepared for whoever was there. He didn't call it revenge. He said it was making memories. But to me it was hell. It turns out it was a couple who were friends of his. The place was where we often went for meals. On the way there, I asked my husband why he suddenly wanted to take me out for drinks now. He replied, while you were having your affair, I wasn't having any fun. I can't even remember. So now I want to have fun for the remaining time. I understand how you felt, and if you understand me too, then join me." He added, "If I don't do this, I won't understand the point of our marriage and feel like I can't move forward." Overwhelmed, I blurted out, "I understand. If that's the case, let's stay together and create more memories. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me." But he immediately replied, "I can't. Being with you would remind me of the affair and drive me mad. I don't want to feel that pain. I wish I hadn't spoken." The gathering, though a bit awkward, seemed enjoyable for my husband. Our friends, another couple, seemed to be extra cheerful, perhaps trying to make things comfortable. But when my husband asked why the wife wasn't drinking, it turned out she was pregnant. My husband seemed genuinely surprised and was very pleased. But for a brief moment I saw a shadow of sadness on his face. Seeing that made me so heartbroken that I had to leave the table. I thought it was all over and went to the restroom. The memories overwhelmed me. I knew I shouldn't run, but I couldn't help waiting to escape. Being apart from my husband is truly heartbreaking. I even thought I'd want to live nearby if we divorced. I even found myself wishing for a child with him. But I guess it's my own doing, right? It hurts being alone, but I've got to tough it out. It's embarrassing, but I really wanted my husband to be happy. I don't plan on associating with him anymore, but when we were having the affair, he was all I could see. Both of us had the same complaints about our spouses, and I was so drawn to him without realizing I was just being played. But I never wanted a child with him. I deeply regret not working through our issues together with my husband. I couldn't even think about my own happiness. I swore never to have an affair again. My husband allowed me to stay in our home until I packed my stuff. He was kind to the end, but I angered him in the end. What set him off was my response to his question, "What would you do if you got pregnant with the other man's child?" I replied, "I don't know. If he's okay with it, I'd have it." He yelled, "Even after divorcing me, you could raise it alone, right? It's the child of the man you love. Would you just casually get rid of it?" Apparently, my husband asked my lover the same question and he said, "I definitely don't want her to have it. It'd be a problem." Hearing this, my husband thought we were both worthless. I demanded alimony from him and was quickly sent back to my parents' place. My parents kept apologizing to my husband, but he looked deeply hurt. When I was sent to my parents, my husband reportedly demanded $40,000 from my lover as compensation. Initially, my lover had offered $7,000, but my husband demanded twice that amount, and my lover agreed to it. But my husband didn't plan on telling my lover's wife about the affair. He was worried it would stress her out, especially since she was pregnant. However, my lover eventually told her everything. Seeing his wife happily talking about their baby, he felt so guilty, he confessed. For some reason, even my husband was scolded by my lover's wife. She called all four of us, me, my husband, my lover, and herself, for a meeting after not seeing him for a while. My lover's eyes were red and swollen in front of his wife. My husband said, "I won't interfere anymore, and I'll get a divorce." But she retorted, "Don't leave him alone. You're also to blame for your wife's actions. Take responsibility." I was just overwhelmed with guilt. After our talk, I was immediately sent back to my parents. Later, my husband and I officially divorced, and he received compensation from my lover. But that money was handed to me, saying, "Use this as compensation for his wife." However, the way my husband looked at me had changed, like he was looking at a complete stranger. I realized he intended to cut ties completely. Tragically, due to stress, my lover's wife lost her baby. But that led to their divorce, and she demanded a hefty sum as compensation. Apparently, he's struggling every month to make ends meet. After my divorce, I tried to forget and move on many times, but I couldn't stop thinking about him and found myself calling or writing letters to my husband. He seemed irritated, but I couldn't stop. Eventually, I heard he had a new girlfriend. I was burning with jealousy, but a part of me felt relieved. I thought this might help me move on. If I could go back, I'd return to the time before the affair. After that, I made up my mind to never think of my hobby again and moved far away. I thought if I didn't, I'd end up constantly following my hobby around, becoming like a stalker. I knew I had to reflect on what I did and I wanted him to be happy. But I also realized I could never make him happy. It's been a few years, but I still think of him. But I believe I'm finally looking forward. But now I believe I'm ready to move forward. I heard through the grapevine that he got remarried. I don't know who she is, and it's not my place to know. But even so, I'm praying for my husband to find happiness. I hope he can build a happy family life we couldn't have together. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you resonated with the content, please leave a positive rating and a comment.